all social justice and social concern and even the social gospel, I think it all begins with a look inside of our own selves. You have to come to a place where you go, well, I have that light in me. This is a crisis of our democracy, yes, but it's also a crisis of our morals.
Welcome, Bob.
Good to be here.
Well, I'm really glad to have you. And our topic today, as you know, has to do with how the light in all inspires, motivates us, helps us interpret social justice issues. And we want to get to that, and we will get to that. And just to give you and our listeners a little bit of an outline as I see the conversation going, obviously we can deviate as we feel led, but I'll ask you kind of an introductory question so that we can get to know you better. But then we'll start kind of broad and just talk about what I introduced as the topic: how does the light in all affect our views and motivations regarding social justice? But then I hope in the latter half of what we do that we get to the elephant in the room. And I think we all know that, at least for us here in the States, and really more than just the States, that has to do with the policies and practices of immigration control in this country, and how we apply what you say in the first half to the second.
Sure.
So that's kind of how I see it going. And at the very end of that other, what I would like to do is give you the opportunity to address very briefly a few different groups of people. And obviously you can choose to say, I don't know what to say, or whatever the case may be there, but I think that would be helpful for our listeners as well. Introductory question. You've been a minister in the church for how long now?
30 years.
30 years. So you've got some experience.
Yes.
What would you have to say to me, let's say, a new guy on the block, just coming into ministry? What's your advice given what you've experienced over the last 30 years?
Stay away.
I was afraid you were going to say that. Well, the podcast is over.
Yeah, exactly. No,
this isn't the shortest one yet.
I would have never stayed for 30 years if I felt there wasn't a reason and there was a purpose and a calling to stay. And that's evolved over time, over those 30 years. If I was talking to younger people today, I would have to really take some time to really walk through a little bit of my story so that they could understand that it may not end up being what you signed up for. Let's put it that way.
That's been your experience?
Yeah, that's been my experience. I went into it thinking ministry was, going to be a lot of fun and a lot of spending time with people and building, relationships and community and everybody was going to be on the same page and, we were going to go in the same direction.
Yeah.
Boy, that hasn't been the case. So,
okay. How has that changed you?
Oh my goodness. Throughout 30 years of ministry, it has not only changed me, but my family, my geography. I've moved a lot of times and to a lot of different places, to a lot of different, even denominationally, I shifted because of this. Moving from much more authority to less and less authority. but that didn't change uh, the conflict and the polity and the struggle that still is there within the church. So it looks different from different angles, I guess you could say. So
Yeah. What I find encouraging myself, and full disclosure here, you're the pastor of the church that I attend here in Indianapolis.
right.
What's encouraging to me is that you see your calling as bigger than a particular denomination or location, that type of thing.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I would say early on that was not the case. I was really committed to a specific denomination,
Hmm.
and to a specific, and even almost to defend that to the nth degree kind of thing. And over time, as I continued to spiritually form and grow and work through my own processes and ask myself some deeper questions, I think that expanded, and I started seeing there's a need um, to reach out to others, and to listen to others, and that there is a what you could call it is streams of living water flowing from many different denominations and religions, that there are things that we can embrace from each of those that can help us on our walk. And in some denominations that I've been a part of, that would be unacceptable.
Yes,
um, and so I
I
continued to
raised my
move.
hand to that too.
Exactly. I've moved closer and closer to a much more ecumenical, much more open and integrated system, I
Yeah.
guess you could call it, rather than a theology. I think we get stuck when we talk about theology. It's more of a system, a community that works to create the ambiance and what is religion for each of us, our spirituality, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. So basically, your answer would be it's complicated. No.
That's
Or
exactly
maybe
right. It's
it's
not easy.
complicated, but yet it's simple too when there's
Yeah.
internal calling. So, yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
appreciate
well, one
that.
of the other things, Steve, I think that is when you talk to somebody about their calling or what they feel called or led to do, it's usually a specific thing.
Hmm.
That I feel led to serve the poor, or I feel led to, work in this area of ministry or something like that. I'm dedicated to the youth of our church.
Mm-hmm.
That has become less and less. And I try for myself,
Mm-hmm.
because it's so all encompassing. I mean, pastors today wear so many hats,
Yes.
and we're involved in so many things. And I have to remember what my gift set is and what my abilities are and what I have the energy and the passion and the desire to do. And if I
Yes.
start trying to do everything and put on all those hats, um, it really can take me down quickly. So,
Yeah. Burnout, which we
burnout.
see a lot of in
Totally.
ministry.
Totally.
Yeah. So you landed as a Quaker minister,
Yes.
and part of the reason I'm asking you to address this topic is Quakers have a long history regarding social justice issues. So, for you, how does the light in all inform and motivate you regarding social justice issues?
Yeah. I think it is the foundation of understanding how I'm going to respond or act upon or engage um, social justice issues. Um, it used to be, it came out of more of my theology or my understanding of what maybe scripture says or what the Bible would say. But what I've come to understand is that when you start to embrace an understanding that there is that of God, or there's that light in every single person, it changes how you view every, and it starts with yourself. It you have to come to a place where you go, well, I have that light in me. Do I recognize it? Do I take the time to, fan the flame? Do I take the time to acknowledge what this light is doing in my life? That it's dispelling the darkness in my own soul and the struggles that I'm having. And once I can actually admit that for myself, I can then have a better understanding, empathy, a care for those other folks that are out there around me that are struggling or in that space of needing some type of social justice. And I don't think that we all in the church recognize or even maybe believe that there's the light in all people.
Yeah.
As Quakers, that's a tenet of our faith. We hold on to that and bring that up all the time. That there's that of God, there's that light in all people.
Have you always felt that way, or have you changed over time about
Definitely,
that light?
Yeah, I've definitely changed over time. I grew up Lutheran, and very conservative Lutheran, and moved from there into being an Anglican priest, and then finally coming to Quakerism down the road a little further. And some of that makes sense because I went from very rigid to a little looser to now much more open and affirming to that light in all people. I think growing up though, and in my early days in ministry, I thought, well, there were people that had Christ in them or God in them or the light in them. And there were people who didn't. And that's a super difficult, challenging concept to wrap your mind around, because you start to ask bigger questions, and it doesn't take that long. You start asking bigger questions like, well, that means that the people that are my deepest enemies also have a spark, have that light in them as well. And what does that mean? And how do I treat everybody as though they have that light in them? When I disagree with them, or I'm angry at them, or I don't want them even a part of my life, or they've been abusive, there's all kinds of things that it makes you really have to process and think when you're engaging someone at any level.
Yeah.
So it's hard.
Am I correct that what you're saying is when you have that view of I've got the light, but you don't, obviously that's a me versus them
Totally
perspective, and that totally is different than the perspective you would have toward social justice when you see it's all us together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you could take just a minute to address for our listeners how you came to see the light within all. Was it in a classroom? Was it in a time of crisis? Was it, I'm just curious.
So I was in the process of working on my doctorate in leadership and spiritual formation. And I was coming also to the realization that I think I'm a Quaker. And it was focused on my studies around Gandhi's influence on Martin Luther King Jr. during the civil rights movement. Um, and there was a moment as I was doing the studies where Gandhi is writing, and I believe that I probably won't get the quote right, but he says basically, if it was by the Beatitudes, I could call myself a Christian, you know, and I would, and as I sat there reading that, I was like, wow, wait a minute, this is throwing me off here, you know, like he's Indian and he follows a completely different religious path. And then as I started to look at it, and I looked at Bayard Rustin, a Quaker who is teaching Martin Luther King Jr. about Gandhi and telling him about his ways, I noticed Martin Luther King Jr. being open to that and saying, yeah, I can embrace these things to understand how to be better at what I do with social justice and you know what was happening within the civil rights movement. And as I was doing that, I was also then looking at my own life and my own world and how much of my past had been about pushing others away and only conforming to those that agreed with me or were in my camp, as we would say. And I went, that really is disturbing. That it disturbs me. It puts me in a place where I'm telling other people you're in or out, you're right or wrong. You know, I don't want to have anything to do with you. And that did then all of a sudden did not fit with just the basic principles of the gospel. That's not what Jesus said. You know, he said to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And right there's the issue. It was like I said before, I have to start with myself each and every time. I have to go back and start with myself each and every time. And that was something in my doctoral work that I had to go through my own kind of reckoning. I had to go through my own dark night of the soul. I had to go through my own process to come to a place where I said, wow, in the past I wasn't okay with this. And now I can't see it any other way. I can't look at other people and go, well, there's that of God, or there's that light in all people. And that really slowed me down. It made me stop saying I'm right and you're wrong, or you're out, and all of a sudden I had to stop and think and go, each and every relationship that I have, the people that I consider my enemies, you know, now it makes more sense. You know, some of the things that I said I believed, but I wasn't believing fully.
Yes.
You know, that like Jesus saying, you know, to love your neighbor as yourself, but also to pray for your enemies. You know, like, wait a minute, why am I praying for my enemies?
Yeah.
There's more to this. And I think we were I don't know if it's the maturity or if it's, you know, the spiritual formation in my own life, and allowing myself that process to continue to learn and grow and not shut people out before I give them a chance. That's what then led me to say, okay, I have to start with the light inside me, and then I have to look for first the light inside of them. So a great example of this was a person at a former meeting that I was a part of out in Oregon, came to me and said, well, what about Adolf Hitler? You know, and I said, what about Adolf Hitler? And they said, did Adolf Hitler have the light inside of him? And I said, I know you don't want me to say this, but yes. And they said, well, but yeah, but look what happened to society and the world, and, you know, and all these Jews. And he kind of went on. And I said, yeah, but if we believe that there's that of God in everyone, there's that of God in everyone. We can't just kind of pick willy-nilly here, like say, okay, well, I really don't like this person. This person's done a lot of bad things, you know, so
Yeah,
boom,
we could
there
base
we go.
that on emotions. We could base it on a rule book,
Yep,
all kinds
totally.
of ways. Yeah.
We check it off. It makes it easier
Yeah.
in the moment. Oh, I can check that person off.
Yeah.
I don't have to deal with that anymore. And I think we we had an incredible conversation around that. But in the end, I think we all agreed that there was, at one time or even throughout Hitler's life, there is this light in him. It may be dim and it may not be able to be seen very well, but we have to admit that. And that's what gives us hope for all people. That's why, as Quakers, we don't, we're very much against the death penalty, because we're saying, even no matter what they've done and whatever's gone on in their life, there's still that light and there is still hope in that person's life. And we don't have the right to extinguish that light. That wasn't put there by us.
Yeah. So let's apply this a little more to social justice, as you were starting to answer your question of how that seeing the light within yourself and dealing with that affects then how you respond to justice issues regarding others who also have that light in them.
Yeah, I think that, the process of looking at yourself and working on it in your own heart is critical to being able to look at someone else and having empathy and care and love for them, because we know, Steve, we know, right? We know how bad we are.
Yes.
And how the struggles that we have and the things that we're not, we don't handle well. I'm trying to be kind here, but
Yes.
it's the garbage that's in our life,
Yes.
and we all have it. And if I'm just looking at somebody else's garbage, let's put it that way, if I'm looking at somebody else's garbage, this is the whole, well, I got a speck in, you have a speck in your
Yes.
eye, or I have a log in mine.
That's what Jesus was addressing.
Yeah, and I think that's what we have to do. We have to start with the log in our own eye. I think all social justice and social concern and even the social gospel, I think it all begins with a look inside of our own selves before we can turn around. I think it's evident in Jesus. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Well, how do I do that? Do I do that well? No. I wish I could say I did, but I don't. I eat too much. I'm overweight. I struggle, on a daily basis with, a whole list of things. I won't put them out on the internet here. but once I see that in myself, I can look at others and go, well, those people are struggling too, and they have issues too, and they may be different, or their environment, or the way they were raised, or their finances, or racism, or you add whatever it is to it, and you get a bigger picture of, oh, this is how they got to this place.
Yes.
And then stop and go, and somewhere in there's the light in that person. And
that
all this
light
stuff
has
is
the ability to shine light on our garbage and help us clean it up.
absolutely. That's why every morning when I get up, I used to, the good Christian thing to do is to get up and do your daily devotions and read your Bible and and pray and all those kind of things. And I'm not saying none of those things are good and beneficial to you. I'm not saying that. That's not my process anymore. I get up, coffee's first. I grab my cup of coffee, and I sit down and I go over and I go over and I open up our blinds, and I get up early because my wife is a teacher, and so she goes to school early. And so it's still not light yet. And my first thing is to watch the sun rise over the houses behind us. And there's something about that that centers me, because it's like the light in me and around me rising.
Mm.
And it rises in me, and it brings out this picture. It focuses me to see, all right, the world is okay. I'm okay. I have the light in me. I need to center down, and I need to hear what that light is saying to me for today. And it reminds me that it's being shown on all my neighbors, on all the houses around me, because they have that same light in them too.
All around the world.
Yeah.
Let's move to the second half here, if we can. And what really even prompted our conversation today is a letter that you wrote yesterday to the congregation. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I think it will help serve as for instance, apply what you're saying to the current things that are happening regarding immigration control in the United States in particular. And one of the things that you say here is, as many of my fellow Quaker ministers and leaders, as many of our fellow Quaker ministers and leaders, see this moment as a crisis of our Constitution, federal overreach, militarized enforcement, and the erosion of our civil liberties. I believe it is a crisis of our democracy and morals, as well as a failure of the faith communities in our country to live into the vision of the beloved community in which Quakers strive to create. Can you say a little more about what's behind that? What motivated you to say that?
Well, first of all, it was some of that wording is directly from the materials that came about the march that is being organized currently right now in Minneapolis, which I think it was Saturday night late, and then Sunday morning as I was entering for meeting for worship, that I received another contact about going to participate in that.
And just so our listeners know, now this is Thursday, 4 days later?
Right, and this would be the day that it would be happening. So obviously I'm not there, and I chose not to attend, and that's why I wrote this letter to our meeting and to others to help them understand the process of discernment that I've been going through the last couple of days. And that paragraph you read and the things that were said in there are not just my concerns. And I think this is something that is part of the discernment process. This has been very clear the last 3-4 days here. I've been immersed in conversations with leaders, pastors, people from our meeting, people that are not connected to the religious or clergy groups, because I want to hear what is the voice, what is the what is being said out there, and how does that then speak to my condition and where I'm at right now. And so I use those words there, the crisis of our Constitution, federal overreach, militarized enforcement, and the erosion of our civil liberties, because those are things I heard from the people that I talked with. That's what they're saying. And sometimes people get confused with they shoot the messenger.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to like help clarify these are the things that are the real issues on people's hearts and minds,
Mm-hmm.
especially those on the ground in Minneapolis.
Yes.
These are the things that they are talking about. These are the things that they're living in real time. But the second part of that is where it comes down to my heart on this issue. And that's, this is a crisis of our democracy. Yes. But it's also a crisis of our morals. It's just what I mean. This is why on Sunday, during Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, I chose to talk about morals, and what Dr. King was trying to say early on. In his first year of his pastorate at 25 years old, he was already talking about the failures of the morals of our country and what that meant, and what that meant is how it plays out. It continues to play out still today, that we aren't coming together. We're still divided. I mean, even, we hear it every year on Martin Luther King Jr. Somebody has to make the quote, that 11 o'clock on Sunday morning is the most divided, time in this country, and it's like, wait a minute, what are we doing about this? And that's the thing that last sentence there, it's a failure of the faith communities in our country to live into the vision of the beloved community. That is so, I don't know, that's so at the heart of what I struggle with the church, that we continue to divide, we continue to separate, and then we throw rocks at each other, and we don't ever come together and find our commonalities to work together. Sure, yeah, we have some parachurch organizations, or we have, social groups that are feeding the hungry, but not everybody even participates in those, and not everybody agrees that that's what we should be doing, And so what's ended up happening is we've allowed politics to meld with our ideas and our understandings within the church. And that has instead of learning and understanding it and working to understand it and see how they relate, we've kind of just pushed them apart instead. And that's it's not, the idea of a beloved community is about reconciliation. It's about coming together and seeing our differences and knowing that there is a way that we can do this together where we can help others. We can actually move into a place and change their outcomes, but we've relegated that to to politics, or to I could go on and on about this.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying is we've relegated it outside of the church.
Yeah. Because of the vacuum of leadership or influence within society.
And I think that there are people within any faith who are going to say, well, if you talk about politics, and I know this, I hear this all the time. I've struggled with it in almost every one of the churches or meetings I've served. If you talk about politics, then you're going to be on one side or the other, and you're probably not going to. I'm probably going to disagree with you. It's going to come out. And then people are going to get upset, and well, I'm a. And they're going to state their side of the issue and why that I'm wrong or they're right, and that is not what we should be doing. We should be coming together and listening to each other and working on building relationships and reconciling those relationships so that we can be more serving our communities and the people who are really struggling outside the doors of our worship spaces.
Yeah. And we don't need to get into the particulars of what's happening in Minneapolis, because obviously there's a spotlight there, and you say in your letter this is a much bigger issue than
Totally.
just what's happening there. If what happens there can happen anywhere, you and with your permission, I'll even, if attach this letter to the podcast, but you kind of end it with a call to, as we Quakers call the meeting, most Christians would say the church, with a call. And you say, as a fellow minister in your midst, I plead with you to loudly object to the atrocities in a Quakerly manner. Please don't pretend this isn't happening. And if you're an ICE apologist, I challenge you to have the courage to change your mind. Can you tell us a little bit about what is the Quakerly Way, and why you have hope that someone would change their mind? Why are you calling people to change their mind?
Yeah, I think that, well, let's start with the Quakerly Quakerly manner. I think often what happens is when you hear loudly object, since that's the words I use, loudly object. If you hear loudly object, you think of people who are, maybe have a bullhorn in their hand, or they're, holding up signs and yelling at people or throwing things, or, loudly objecting. And I don't think that's what I mean by loudly objecting.
Okay.
I mean loudly objecting, first of all, in your own life, in your own thoughts, that as you think about this, don't just let these things go by, but actually take a moment to say to yourself, no, I object to those things. I don't agree with what I see happening. I don't think this fits with my understanding of my faith and my understanding of who Jesus was, or whoever you follow. I mean,
or even just moral code.
Exactly.
What you learned in kindergarten.
Exactly. And I think that people need permission today to loudly object in their life. Because I think they're scared to say, well, I think I shouldn't say, well, maybe they are. They're scared to object in any fashion. But yet inside we're being torn up. We're having these, when I talk to people and I listen to people and they share their anguish over what's going on. And I asked them, I said, who are you telling this to? And they're like, I'm not really saying it to anybody. I don't know who to talk to about this. It's okay. You have permission to loudly object. Tell me how you really feel. Let it out. Share it. That's where it comes into being in a Quakerly manner. Well, in a Quakerly manner, we do it in respect. We respect the other person. We listen to them and let them speak before we say anything. And we pause after they get that all out. I was just with someone the other day who they were just kind of going off, and we were at a coffee shop, and they were just like going off, like, I'm so upset about this and that and that. And I just sat there and I listened, and they said, don't you have anything to say? And I said, well, I'm a Quaker. I'm listening to you, let you get it all out. And then I'm going to sit here for a minute in silence and just let that process. And then we'll talk. And I might say something, and I may agree with everything you're saying, but I just want to take the time to respect you and respect myself, and that of God right here in this moment, and that's part of all of our processes as Quakers. Whether we're doing waiting worship, or unprogrammed worship, or we're having a clearness committee. Each of these things have us listening first, taking a moment for pause and sitting in silence, and then responding. And sometimes that response is not a response, it's another question. And that person will continue to go on. And that's fine. I feel like I want to hear people loudly object and say what they need to say. And if that doesn't mean they have to raise their voice or yell or even protest or go down, downtown or something like that. So that's what I mean when I talk about loudly object to the atrocities in a Quakerly manner. The other side of that, what was the other question? I lost my, to change, right?
To change, yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling it's going to relate to just what you said.
Absolutely. It's well, first of all, I'm going to go back to everything I've said all this whole time, is the change is not for me to point a finger and say, you need to change, even though I do say, if you've been an ICE apologist, I challenge you to have the courage to change your mind. I have to, first of all, deal with myself. Am I willing to change?
Yes.
Am I, if somebody brings a different perspective and I listen and they get it all out and I sit there in the silence and I realize, oh my goodness, there are some things here that I do agree with. Or maybe I don't. Am I willing to change? Am I willing to change in that moment first to have a better conversation? So,
and you, I assume from your own experience, I can say this from my experience, we do have the ability to change. But it takes courage.
Absolutely. Well, sometimes it takes everything you have to change. Growing up, we talked about converting people. And I'm laughing, I know. Wow, what did we think? That's easy. I'm just going to tell them these verses and have them do this prayer and magic, voila, they're going to change. No, there's a whole bunch, and there's psychology, and there's life experiences, and there's familial situations that all go into this. That doesn't work that way, even though that's how we were taught. And sometimes that's why that's so hard for the church, is because we kind of jump onto these simplistic ideas and think, okay, we'll just really lean heavily on the Holy Spirit, or we'll lean heavily on God to make this happen. And it's like, God has been working through us and using us.
The light is within us.
The light is in us.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. It's a complete, that's a change right there. It's a complete mindset change.
Yeah. So. It reminds me of, I once there. It actually was a very conservative church, and this was a gentleman that I worked with, and he was a minister in that church. And one day he said, "You know what I've noticed?" He said, "I've noticed that when a jerk joins our church and is converted, that afterwards they're still a jerk." And, it's like, that's both tragic and it's and humorous.
Well, yeah, and it shows that we don't look at people holistically. And I think part of holistic, the mindset and seeing someone as a whole human, a whole being, is to be able to also then see that light, that glimmer within everybody. And so we see
it takes time.
Oh, and who's building relationships these days? I mean, we're in a society that is sitting kind of funny, behind a computer like we are right now all
Yes.
day long, and not interacting with people or not having conversations like we're having right now, and I mean, loneliness is becoming one of the top, killers in our country. Now, wait a minute, we have a lot going on here that we're not addressing. And so I think it's important that we start looking at people holistically when we start. And that includes ourselves. I got to look at
Yeah.
myself holistically,
Yeah.
body, mind, and spirit.
Yeah. Okay. As we get to wrapping up here, as I said earlier, I want to allow you the opportunity to, and obviously this is pretend. I don't know that any of these people will be listening to this podcast at some point or not, or maybe everyone will. I don't know. But I want you to give you an opportunity to briefly address a few different groups of people. And I know I'm painting with a broad brush here. And to just say what you want to say regarding our current situation and in light of the letter that you wrote yesterday. The first group of people, and we've already touched on this, would be a big, probably football stadium full of religious leaders, spiritual leaders of all stripes. Knowing that you've got people in that crowd that range from maybe as we described ourselves at one point and being very closed off to the idea of and not seeing it us versus they world, to people like, and this is part of what prompted this whole thing, is my son sent me yesterday a link to what's kind of gone viral, is the Episcopal Church Bishop Rob Hirschfield, who recently said at a vigil for Renee, I just lost her last, Good, who was the person killed in Minneapolis. He basically said that it's time to his fellow clergy, he said, it's time for you to get your wills in order because we're entering a new era of martyrdom. So you got both those extremes there. What do you want to say to us? And you can, in a Quakerly way, take as long as you want to think about that. And maybe say, wisdom tells me not to answer that. Okay.
Well, that has been a part of my discernment this week. And I even briefly mention it in this letter. I heard clearly on Martin Luther King Jr. Day at our Shalom Zone gathering, as I was with other clergy and other leaders, maybe more in line with each other than in other situations, as you're talking about.
But still with differences.
There's differences, very much differences in how we approach things. It was very clear to me that some of us are going to be called to go to those front lines, that we will hear that call. And I did. When I first heard that call, I went, oh my goodness. I've talked about this on numerous occasions, and if this came up, I would go. And then it came up and I was like, am I going to go? Is that for me in this moment? And for a while I really felt it was. And then I felt a real sense of no. There are people that are ready and are going already, and that are already there, that are on the front lines speaking truth to power in the same way I would too. And so I felt like there are people who are there that represent me. But then came the second part of that. And the second part was probably even more difficult. It was saying, but what are you going to do right where you're at in your community? And Dr. King was very clear. He said, some of us are going to come out and protest, and some of us are going to get beaten, and some of us are going to go back to our own communities and have to, deal with tongue lashing and all the other stresses that come from trying to educate people in a manner that helps them understand how to make a choice or a decision about what they need to do. And I think oftentimes religious leaders take the easy route. They become milk toast. They make it easy to swallow, and they avoid talking about these difficult things. And I was sitting there listening to the sermon at the MLK service, and all of a sudden I went, I hear what I'm supposed to do. I'm not supposed to go to Minneapolis. I'm supposed to stay here, and I'm supposed to actually speak up and share and do what I'm doing right now, talking about this and sharing my real feelings and utilizing those words that we went through before. Because as a Quaker, we talk about plain speaking. Boy, plain speaking can get you in trouble.
Yeah.
And
sometimes that takes more courage than being on the front line.
Oh, yes. I really was stressed out as I was writing this letter. I was really wrestling with, I know people, I've met with people just recently who told me they're in favor of ICE and they think what ICE is doing is a great thing. And they support them fully. And I listened. And I listened. And there was times where I had a hard time knowing how to respond to that.
Yeah.
But when I sat down to write this letter, this is not just a letter that, was like, well, I'm going to respond and I'm just going to write this letter and that'll take care of that.
It's not just to inform.
No, this is a little bit of education. This is a little bit of my own personal, struggle. All of it is discernment. It's all discernment. And as I always state, every Sunday I leave the pulpit with letting us enter silence, centering down around some queries, because it's not done. Just because I said something, or just because I questioned something, or just because I threw something out there to maybe engage you in understanding something, doesn't mean it's the end all be all last word, period.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most beautiful things that I fully embrace and welcome as a Quaker, is that we have a fluidity to what we believe, that it's never complete. It's never done. There's always an opportunity to ask another query. There's always an opportunity for somebody to question something when new science comes up, when new understandings come up. There's always an opportunity for us to come together and have a better conversation about each of these things.
Yes.
And that's why even in this letter, I end with several queries and even a quote from our Faith and Practice. Not because I agree with everything or I think that's the end all be all, but that helps us then process, okay, what about for me? Because my neighbor may be doing this in a completely different way because they have a different family system, or they have a different situation, or they came from a different country, or so I can't just say, well, this is the end all be all. No, this is our opportunity to start a better conversation each and every time.
And I would say beyond that, what I think of is trust that light is within all.
Absolutely.
That the conversation doesn't end with me speaking. It happens within as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of I told somebody during Christmas when we were doing at our Vesper service, we were lighting candles and doing the whole, Silent Night, singing Silent Night and lighting candles and all holding the candles. But I said, that's a perfect example of what really is going on each and every time we do this. I light my own candle and I see the light in me, and then I pass that on to those around me, and now I can see their light in them. It's a picture of exactly what's happening in that moment. And I think too often, if we're not looking at the light in ourselves, we're passing on nothing.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and I reminded of the children's little song, this little light of mine, I'm going to let
Yeah.
it shine. That's what Jesus was speaking of there. Second group I want you to think about. This is a big arena full of disenfranchised religious folks, people who have just burned out on the church or mosque or whatever it is. What do you have to say to them regarding social justice issues?
I think I would approach it. That could be a big, that could be a big amount of things. A lot of things could be going on
Be a
there.
long
So
talk.
yeah, that could be a long talk, and I wouldn't want to just try to I think on a Sunday morning you're looking at your audience and you're trying to figure out, okay, am I hitting everybody here, as best as
Yeah,
possible?
I know. And I'm
That would-
obviously painting with a broad brush,
Wow.
and that makes
Yeah.
it hard. But and let me just say this. Let me play the part. Part of the reason I'm upset with the religious group X that I was a part of is because they didn't respond to social
Yeah.
justice
Yep.
issues.
Yep. Yeah, and I think we're in a world right now where there's a mass exodus out of the church, because of some of what is going on. Whether we're not responding or whether we are, and that makes it really a complicated thing.
Yes.
And that's where you have to move. I feel like I would have to step back and say, okay, let's take religion out of it for a moment. Let's not use, religious terminology or concepts. Let's just talk about morals.
Values.
Values. What do you value? And honestly, if you take people into themselves and make them, I guess you can't make them, but introduce them to some personal work, I think that's going to be the way you get people to turn and start to see those around them again, and not get into all the, I don't know, the backbiting and let's put it this way. There's a lot of guilt out there. A lot of religious people are carrying a lot of guilt. And if there's a way we can remove that guilt so that they can see they're worthwhile, that they're loved, that there is a world out there that isn't all bad, I think then they can actually then turn around and go, I can share that with others, and I can help them see that as well. But I think we've gotten so wrapped up in ourselves, in our culture, and in our world that, we've been taught that the American dream is, all about making money and living this life that very few people can live, and we have to get back to a dream, like Martin Luther King Jr.'s, that we'll all be sitting together around the table, and participating together, no matter where we come from, no matter what we look like, no matter, what we've done.
Yeah. It's easy to lose sight of that.
Yeah.
Third group. This is a group of fervent religious folks who see this simply as, and I'm speaking of ICE in particular here, as simply as the enforcement of the law
Yeah.
that are long overdue to be enforced. What do you have to say to us?
Yeah. I think in those kind of situations, it's very hard to debate the facts because everybody sees from their perspective and listen to their news sources and to what they see, and thus they make their assumptions and beliefs around those things. And I do the same thing. We all do that.
Right.
If there's a way we can break that barrier, and move into a place where we can listen and then have dialogue where we are both listening and going back and forth and sharing both of our perspectives without getting angry and without raising voices or without storming off or anything like that. I think then we're making inroads no matter what. The conversation is going to be critical to getting us back onto a place. And I think it has to, one of the places that I think we're missing out on this is families are dividing and they're not talking to each other anymore. You know, well, Uncle Sal or whoever, they are over there and I'm not going to talk to him anymore. You know, that's not how families work. That's not. So what have we done? You know, we're cutting off ourselves to not only the world but our families, and that trickles down into everything else. You know, it's whatever we do at home is going to be then, you know, seen as okay outside our doors, and so I think that there also has to be some realization, eye-opening. It has to almost get so bad that there's a reality check. I think we're getting pretty close. In some of the things that I've heard from Minneapolis, there are people who are scared. You know, that changes things when people get scared, when they're worried that that their life could be taken, you know. It's in those moments when we're faced with that reality, and I think that much of a reality, that we have to ask ourselves, okay, is this what's happening right now okay? If I'm being threatened, my life is being threatened, you know? And I think that's where we have to get to the place of like having a better conversation around that, but also being realistic.
Yeah.
You know? And that's hard.
Yeah.
Those are the hard conversations.
That's not easy. None of this is easy. Would it be fair for me to summarize that your message to putting myself in that group is, don't be afraid to go talk to somebody about this?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't think that I want to be careful in how I say this. That means though we don't just go talk to people that we already know agree with us.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of that happening.
I was trying to imply that, but not very clearly, that I'm willing to listen to other sides of this.
Yep.
And just
I think I think that's one of the detriments of the church.
Yeah.
Is when we're at church or when we're in our religious setting, we assume, well, I chose this because most of the people here agree with what I believe. You know, and in 30 years of ministry, Steve, I disagree with that completely.
Yeah.
I mean, on a daily basis, I sit with people that are completely on opposite ends of the spectrum about things that if they sat down and I talked to them individually, they would say, oh yeah, we agree. We all agree on that, don't we?
Mm-hmm. I think, and I may be misquoting, quoting the wrong person here, but the message is the same. It reminds me of it. I think it was Eugene Peterson was asked by someone in an audience that he was speaking of, who said, "I'm moving to this community. How do I go about finding a church?" And his response was, "Well, find the church front door that's closest to your front door and attend that church and love the people that are there." That was his how you shop for a church.
That's not the typical way we shop for
No,
churches in
no,
America.
I understand. I understand. Yeah. Um, the last person I want to give you the opportunity to address, and this is an individual. This is the widow of Renee Good. What do you have to say to her?
Um, that just brings a lot of emotion, because there's so much there. As a pastor, um, who is with people after someone has died, and who may be the only person who can, you know, who has to have the right words or whatever, in those moments. Um, I don't think there's any right words in this moment. And the presence is the most important thing in that moment. To be able to be there to support her. I pray she has a community that is surrounding her and giving her space, and has that opportunity to not just keep speaking but listening, and giving her space to have silence, and to remember the love and the preciousness of their relationship, and not let that get caught up or lost in the horrible atrocity that has taken place. I'm sure right now that's really hard. That's not happening, and 10 years down the line, I'm sure if we look back at other situations like this, those families are still wrestling with and trying to understand why this even happened. You know, but I think words aren't the thing in these moments. I think that's what the media, that's what that's what sometimes the religious world even tells us. We have to have the right word. We have to say the right thing. We have to do the right thing. After 30 years of ministry, sometimes it's just sitting and being there, and holding, putting an arm around, or holding a hand, wiping a tear. It's the presence that is the most important. And I don't think there's anybody out there right now that could have the right word to say to her. And that's sad. That's the world we live in right now.
Well, Bob, I really appreciate you sharing your insights, your story, but most of all, your heart with us today.
It's been great, Steve. I really appreciate it. Look forward to hearing the responses of how this goes. So
Yeah, thank you.